Immune builders and plague busters. The verse that I've chosen is worship the Lord your God, and his blessing will be on your food and water, and he will take away sickness from among you. Exodus 23:25. And so much of immune building, it involves the food and water that we ingest. Okay, Sandy, do me a favor. If things get weird on your side, raise your hand. And otherwise, I'm just going to power through hearing my former voice.
Okay.
Okay.
I still think
dehydration is pervasive underlayer of all diseases. So to know whether or not you're ingesting enough water, take the amount that you weigh in pounds. Say it's 150 pounds, call it 150 ounces. You want to drink half that amount in a given day, and you want to space it out during the day. You want to drink between meals. You want it not cold, not like lukewarm, but definitely not cold. Cold slows down digestion, congeals the fat that might be in your blood. Not a good thing. So you want to stop drinking a half hour before your meals and reinstate drinking an hour afterwards. Avoid chlorine or fluoride in the water. Well water, spring water is the best if you can. If you're using well water, have it tested. And then, you know, there's so many filters that are very effective for screening out different pollutants in our water that I would include chlorine and fluoride in. Water helps keep your temperature normal, lubricates and cushions the joints. It helps protect your brain, your spinal cord, other sensitive tissues. And of course, it gets rid of waste through urination, perspiration, bowel movements, helps us to digest our food better. And again, the title of this is Immune Boosters and Plague Busters. Sanitation is vital. There's hand sanitizer everywhere, but washing with good, plain old soap and water is our best defense. Avoid the antibacterial things as much as you can. Our body builds up a resistance to those. And of course, hand sanitizers, all the chemicals, especially the alcohol, our body absorbs those. So it's best to use them as little as possible, to rely on the hand washing. Food. As far as food goes, we're going to address some other issues further in the presentation, but you want to reduce or eliminate sugar. It causes inflammation. It lowers our resistance to disease. It's just not our friend. Stevia is a really good replacement. Artificial sweeteners are not. Stevia is natural, comes from a plant, and it's actually good for us and really, really a better substitute. Dates are really good. Honey in moderation, molasses, other natural sweeteners. Chocolate. We hear all the good things about chocolate, dark chocolate, but to make it palatable, there is a good amount of fat and sugar in there. There are some that don't have as much, they are more bitter. And so if you are going to go the dark chocolate route, I would suggest those. Oil is still oil. We are water-based creatures. Keeping our oil to the minimum, getting the oil that our body needs through nuts, small amount in grains, coconut, of course, those are the best way for us to get our oil. Free oils are not our friend, especially hydrogenated. But yeah, reducing our oil is very, very important for enhanced circulation and everything else. Dairy adversely affects our immune system. I would dare say that most of us are lactose intolerant, whether we recognize it or not. For me, it shows up in like runny nose and things like that. My respiratory system responds quite quickly in an adverse way when I ingest dairy, but it's going to be affecting us in a bad way, whether or not we recognize it or not. Increasing our greens, that's where our minerals are, so many of our vitamins. The fresher, the better. grow our own. Reducing toxicity is so important. So many of the food intolerances or allergies that we test positive for are actually due to the toxins that they use to grow our food. Celery is a big one. We grew our own celery this year, and boy, it was wonderful, as well as everything else that we were able to eat fresh from the garden. Um, Keep moving. I use the word move instead of exercise. So many of us seem to be allergic to exercise. So I use the word move. And some of us are aware, maybe all of us, that sitting is, in the eyes of the medical community, the new smoking. It is that damaging when we sit still. We shouldn't be sitting any more than an hour at a time. If we do, it just increases our health risks by up to 390%. And again, we're very, very aware of the health concerns that are around the world right now. Anything that we can do that will keep our body in an optimal condition, including moving, as well as, of course, avoiding smoking, is going to be in our behalf. We know by Ellen White, perfect circulation indicates perfect health. We want to keep that circulation optimal. One thing that we might not have been aware of is exercising can actually improve our gut health. The more science is studying our gut, the more impressed they are with that. So much of our health is wrapped up in our gut. So exercise increases butyrate. It increases our overall health. It produces good bacteria. Higher levels of Akkermansia improves our metabolic health. It helps prevent obesity, and it lowers bifidobacterium, which is not helpful. We don't want that one. It helps us manage many health problems, lowers the risk of stroke, metabolic syndrome. We know that's a precursor to diabetes and other life-threatening diseases, chronic diseases. High blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, both of those can be reversed in most instances, and exercise is a big factor in that. Depression, which is hard because we don't want to get out when we're depressed, or move when we're depressed. But when we can, by God's grace, do that, it really makes a difference. Helps with anxiety, many types of cancer, arthritis, helps prevent falls. It helps strengthen our bones, and it helps, what's the other factor for the falls? Oh, strengthens our bones, and just the inner ear gets the stimulation that it needs to help us with falls. It can also help improve cognitive function, helps lower the risk of death from all causes. It stimulates various brain chemicals that may leave us feeling happier, more relaxed, less anxious. Just talked about that a little bit. Delivers oxygen and nutrients, helps our cardiovascular system, can help us fall asleep faster, get better sleep, and deepen our sleep. And I don't know about y'all, but for me, it takes a lot of outdoor activity, pretty constant outdoor activity, to regulate my sleep. It's probably the vitamin D and the melatonin, as well as the cardiovascular activity. But I need quite a bit of that to help my sleep stay regulated. Exercising with an intensity that is adequately high, it can boost our cardiorespiratory effectiveness. That will improve our overall health, and not just our respiratory and cardiovascular, but it's also going to be a better balanced gut. And again, these are all preventative that we can and should be doing right now that will help us to not get sick with anything, let alone the current health situation in the world. So our gut actually has a circadian rhythm. We often think of it just involving our head, but our gut needs that rhythm. Eating our meals regularly on time. One of the things that I would suggest if you have trouble sleeping is going to 2 meals a day and not eating later than 5 or 6, so that food has a good chance to digest. If you've got sluggish digestion, I would move that stop time up earlier. stop eating maybe around 3, no later than 4. 2 days of sleep deprivation causes subtle changes in the gut flora. It increases the bacteria associated with weight gain, obesity, uh, type 2 diabetes, and fat metabolism. So we want to be getting regular sleep. And of course, trust in God. So many people around the world are dealing with so much stress regarding this current health challenge and the ramifications thereof. And trusting in God goes an awful long way. There's so many things that we cannot control. The world tells us, well, control your stress level. If it's stressing you, get rid of it. Well, you can't always. And many times that's not a viable option. So trusting in God is huge. Stress increases our sensitivity to many things. It reduces our blood flow. It alters our gut bacteria. The isolation that so many people are experiencing, crowding in different situations. Oh, California's had this terrible heat stress. I'm sure other areas have well as well, and all that reduces our gut flora diversity, our gut profiles, and directly affects our health as well as our mental well-being. In mice, stress causes an increase in Clostridium and decreases lactobacillus. And they also did a study in students, not so much the increase in Clostridium, but the decrease in lactobacillus. So these are things that our body needs to process our foods optimally and to help us to stay healthy. Okay, fresh air, one of the huge ones. Negative ions, those are the ones that we want. Those are the ones that are helping us stay healthy. They die quickly into pores. They stick to the walls, the ducts, to fabric. But abundant outdoor air clears that stagnant air of the things that cause all these problems: pollen, mold spores, bacteria, viruses, with its negative ions. And it essentially forms a protective circle around us. And I just think of God's care around us, of angels surrounding us. And these negative ions just really help protect our health. The stomach, liver, lungs, and brain. This is a quote by Ellen White. The stomach, liver, lungs, and brain are suffering for want of deep, full inspirations of air, which would electrify the blood and impart to it a bright, lively color, and which alone can keep it pure, give tone and vigor to every part of the living machinery. So it's not enough to be surrounded by good, fresh air. We need to be breathing deeply of it. My anatomy and physiology teacher up at PUC, oh, he lived to be in his late 90s, as far as I know. Even, I mean, he seemed old when we were students. I'm sure he wasn't, but he seemed like it. But he was always so full of vigor. He would do jumping jacks in front of the class at 7:30 in the morning. It was very distressing. But he was just the neatest guy. And he was always a proponent of breathing deeply. And he was healthy all his life. He just was a living example of what God wants to do in and through us. And deep breathing was a big deal for him. Uh, Fresh air will neutralize the free radicals that we know to be harmful, revitalizes cell metabolism, enhances immune function, which again, this is part of what this is all about. Purifies the blood. We don't want sluggish, poisoned blood. Balances the autonomic nervous system, promotes deep sleep, healthy digestion, increases growth, improves the function of the protective cilia in the lungs. This current uh, health challenge in the world affects the lungs. We're going to get into that. It attacks the lungs. We're going to get into that a little bit more further on. And of course, it decreases anxiety, which goes hand in hand with stress relief and trusting in God. I'm just amazed at how this all is so interconnected. Um, this is a quote from back in the Spanish flu. A few medicines were used to relieve the patient's symptoms and aid their recovery, but these were considered less important than were regular meals. Like I was mentioning, regular time for meals is very important. Our gut has a circadian rhythm. Warmth and plenty of fresh air and sunlight. those were the most efficacious. Plenty of fresh air and sunlight. Elements of hydrotherapy for nurses emphasizes use of moist fomentations to draw congestion away from the lungs for effective treatment of pneumonia. Many of us have practiced that with good results. Very, very helpful. Yet right in the middle of that, it says the supplying of plenty of fresh, cold air is of the greatest importance. This one thing alone will do more than all the other means combined in reducing the mortality in pneumonia. And again, this current health challenges has some symptoms that are pneumonia-like. Keep the patient warm, add bedding, use of hot water bottles. We have other things, but the windows should be open wide and a constant supply of cold air kept up. Better still, the bed placed in an open veranda or on a screen porch. If the patient is kept warm, no effects need to be feared. We've gotten away from that. We keep everybody so warm and cozy, and we keep that air temperate, and our lungs don't have the advantage of ingesting that wonderful cold air. It's very, very helpful. I'm a bit challenged by it right now, I'll tell you, because the temperatures are dropping down to freezing at night. But I'm still keeping that window open, and I just today piled more covers on my bed. So it's really, really important. Another thing that can be done if you have a sick person in the room, besides that cold, fresh air, is at least daily cut a good organic onion in half, put it in the room, and it will actually absorb the pathogens in the room. And it's very, very helpful for keeping the air pure in the room. So free circulation of air day and night. Spend time outdoors whenever possible, as much as you can be. And we're going to get into sunlight. Open the windows at every opportunity. Indoor plants. There are so many indoor plants that will extract the volatile chemicals from the air, as well as we know, the carbon dioxide giving us oxygen. Some of them, in fact, many of them are toxic to pets. So do your homework if you have pets, because yeah, we don't want to harm our babies. Get an indoor waterfall. They have those for like tabletops. Those will generate negative ions and help to recharge the air. And again, breathe deeply. Shallow breathing saps our energy, our mental clarity. Weak oxygen-starved lungs that have no elasticity. And over, we've heard about the patients that are struggling in the hospital, how their lungs are affected. We want to take this time to build up our lung capabilities and to be proactive. And again, more with fresh air. A leading cause of respiratory infections is due to the presence of microorganisms, dust, and toxins. Again, we can naturally boost our immunity by deep breathing of fresh, clean air. Fresh air at the seaside or along a running creek or even bigger a river is very, very helpful. Those small moisture molecules provide the positive ions that really make a big difference. Many years ago, I was recovering from a life-threatening case of anemia, and I had occasion to walk by the seashore just about every day and to breathe deeply. And I really feel like that, as well as dietary changes and other things I implemented, went a long way in helping me to recover. The white blood cells that fight our diseases also make use of this oxygen in the fresh air to do what they need to do. Helps our heart to be healthy. Oxygen is absorbed through the capillaries and just makes, well, I don't know how to go back, but anyways, fresh air makes a huge difference, and deep breathing of this fresh air. So sunlight, the ultraviolet radiation in sunlight, positive and negative health effects. We're going to dwell on the positives. Sunlight is a principal source of vitamin D. There's also a mutagen that is very present in sunlight. A dietary supplement can supply the vitamin D without the mutagenic effect, but I would posit that there's many health effects, positive health effects of sunlight that perhaps we're not even aware of yet, that a supplement won't be able to do for us. That being said, if one is feeling ill or fighting any kind of a cold or a disease, increasing the supplementary vitamin D can and often is quite helpful. Sunlight promotes a positive health effect. It also strengthens the bones, possibly inhibits the growth of some cancers, positive effect for endorphin levels, so you're going to feel better, possible protection against multiple sclerosis, which I find very interesting. When I did a DNA test, found out that my father passed on that gene, but I don't have any of the symptoms, probably, possibly, partially at least, because I spend a lot of time in the sun. Uh, Visible sunlight to the eyes helps affect the melatonin synthesis, maintenance of normal and robust circadian rhythms for sleep patterns, and it reduces our risk of seasonal affective disorder. Again, there are lights that we can use to help with that, especially those in the northern hemisphere, northern latitudes where we don't get that much sun in the winter. But when the sun is available, that's the best way to deal with it. Atomic, let's see, we want to be out in the sun averaging 5 to 30 minutes twice a week without sunscreen. More is just fine. Unlike a supplement, any excessive vitamin D that you might absorb through sunlight, your body will regulate that. It's not going to become toxic. It's not going to build up. And of course, if you have a darker complexion or weaker sunlight, you'll need more minutes of exposure or more times during the week, or both. So now let's take a look at the current health challenging that the world is facing. This is a really new study just at the end of August. And they found that the infection begins when the virus enters the body through receptors in the nose. Then it proceeds through the body, entering cells, another place where that particular receptor is present. The intestines, kidneys, and heart, which will account for at least some of the cardiac and GI symptoms that the doctors have been encountering in these patients. So it doesn't just infect those cells that have those particular receptors. It goes on to actually hijack the body's own symptoms, tricking it into up-regulating receptors in places where they aren't usually found. So it's becoming more effective as it spends time in the body. And again, the more that we have developed good health habits that will fortify our body against this, it's been likened to a burglar who slips into your unlocked second floor window, starts to ransack your house. But then it doesn't just take your stuff, it throws open all the doors and windows so the accomplices can rush in and help pillage more effectively. So it really starts breaking down things. But again, if we have doors and windows that are harder to open, that's going to be in our best interest. So the renin-angiotensin system controls so many aspects of the circulatory system, including the body's levels of a chemical called bradykinin. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but that helps to regulate blood pressure. But it attacks those receptors, and so then it starts making the body to go kind of crazy. They call it a bradykinin storm. It's a massive runaway buildup of this chemical in the body. Oh, Sandy, how do I go back?
Your arrow.
Well, anyways.
There you go.
Okay, wow, wonderful. So it affects the heart, it damages the heart, it affects the lungs. With the lungs, it goes in and it affects the liquids in the lungs and basically turns them into a hydrogel, which explains why people that even on the ventilators aren't oxygenating well, because that substance is so thick that their lungs, the cilia, can't absorb the oxygen that they're trying to help them to get. So again, we want to be having optimally healthy lungs so they can fight off this possible effect of the lungs. So the bradykinin storm causes damage to the hearts. It can create arrhythmias, low blood pressure. It also moves into the neurological system, specifically the brain. It can cause dizziness, seizures, delirium, and stroke. They're finding that even after the respiratory and cardiac symptoms have cleared up, that many people are still experiencing the neurological effects. There's evidence of leaky blood vessels in their brains. So anything that we have done beforehand to keep those blood vessels toned and reduce that risk of leakiness is going to be in our favor. It can also cause a lead to a breakdown of the blood-brain barrier. Most of us are aware that under normal circumstances, that barrier acts as a filter between our brain and the rest of our circulatory system. It lets the nutrients and small molecules that the brain needs to function in, keeps out toxins and pathogens, and keeps the brain's internal environment tightly regulated. This may be part of why people are continuing to experience these symptoms, because these toxins and pathogens have snuck in there during the disease process, and they're continuing to experience symptoms that are related to that. So it can, yeah, it's a reasonable hypothesis that many of the neurological symptoms could be due to the excess of bradykinin, but they're correlating that to similar neurological symptoms being observed in other diseases that result from the excess of bradykinin. So things that we can do that will help with that are very, very proactive. Increased bradykinin levels could also account for other common symptoms. ACE inhibitors, many of us know that, a class of drugs that are used to treat high blood pressure, have a similar effect on the RAS system of our body as COVID-19. The virus acts pharmacologically as an ACE inhibitor, mirroring the actions of these drugs. By acting as a natural ACE inhibitor, it may be causing the same effects that hypertensive patients sometimes get when they take these drugs. ACE inhibitors cause a dry cough and fatigue. Two textbook symptoms of COVID-19, they can potentially increase blood potassium levels, which has also been observed in COVID-19 patients. The similarities between these ACE inhibitor side effects strengthen this hypothesis. ACE inhibitors are also known to cause a loss of taste and smell. Many of us know that that's become one of the definitive symptoms of COVID-19. So it probably affects the cells surrounding the olfactory nerve cells, and that's what's causing that. Okay. Leaky vasculature, the leaky blood vessels that have been seen in COVID-19 could be responsible for the COVID toes. One of the symptoms in many patients is swollen, bruised toes. It can also, bradykinin as a chemical can also mess with the thyroid gland, which could produce the thyroid symptoms that they've been recently observing in some of the patients. So it's very intricate how this particular disease process affects people. This hypothesis could also explain why women seem to be better protected than men against this disease, the COVID-19. Vitamin D is a potentially very useful COVID-19 drug. Most of us have heard about that. The vitamin is very directly involved in the RAS system, that the bradykinin is effective works in, and it could prove helpful by reducing levels of another compound known as REN. This could potentially stop those bradykinin storms from forming. If you were able to hear that, if we are up on our vitamin D, which most of America at least is deficient, but if we have an adequate amount of vitamin D in our system, we can stop the potentially deadly effect that COVID-19 has had on so many others. It's readily available, even if you can't get to the sun. They say around 20% of the population is deficient. My understanding is it's more than that. It's certainly worth a look-see. Other compounds that could treat the symptoms could reduce the hyaluronic acid levels, potentially stopping those deadly hydrogels that are stopping people from getting enough oxygen absorbed from their lungs. And then there's another medication that could mimic the mechanism the researchers believe that protects women more than men from the COVID-19. So these are all things that they're looking at as potential medically helpful interventions. For the intestines, I would suggest for intestinal health, wild harvested Cape aloe leaf, organic senna leaf, cascara, those are all things that keep the bowels moving, but they don't negatively affect the beneficial gut flora. Oregon grapefruit, ginger root, garlic. Garlic is good for so many things: respiratory, circulatory, the elimination organs. Cayenne pepper tones the blood vessels, and habanero is in that class. All of those help our kidneys, our hearts, our blood vessels, and they could potentially reduce the hyaluronic acid levels. Perhaps some of those would, and reduce the REN levels. So again, looking at protective measures, if we feel ourselves affected, or definitely before that, it's going to be beneficial to us no matter what our situation. Thyme, especially the essential oil, it's an antiviral and it helps with digestion. We want to eat a diverse diet that's rich in whole foods. And I would, as many sources that I were looking at, they strongly suggest a plant-based diet. Veggie, legumes, beans, and fruit, they keep that fiber up. Raspberries, artichokes, green peas, chickpeas, lentils, beans, whole greens, apples, artichokes, blueberries, almonds, pistachios, those are providing nutrients that are specifically targeting gut health and keeping the right flora in there. Fermented foods, soy yogurt, they increase good bacteria, decrease some of the disease-causing bacteria. Sauerkraut made in a healthy way, tempeh, those are all fermented foods that are kind of precursors to good gut health. No artificial sweeteners. They actually not only affect us, well, one of the things that they affect adversely is our gut microbiota. Prebiotics that are in many fruits, vegetables, and our whole grains. The resistant starch in there reduces our insulin, our triglycerides, our cholesterol, and our cholesterol. Missed that typo. One thing that's really helpful that we can't go back and do, but we can do for our children, some of us, is to breastfeed for at least 6 months. That really gets our babies going in a good direction. Whole grains contain non-digestible carbs that promote the growth and beneficial bacteria within our gut microbiota. And again, plant-based diets reduce levels of disease-causing bacteria. We're not going to be so exposed to E. coli or salmonella. It's going to help us with our weight. It's going to help with inflammation, cholesterol, and it's just going to decrease disease all the way around. So it's a really good choice from my perspective. Polyphenols, they lower our blood pressure, our inflammation, cholesterol, oxidative stress. They're in that, polyphenols are in that long list that I had on the prior screen. They can't be digested well completely until they hit the colon and gut bacteria. Some more are cocoa, dark chocolate, red wine, grape skins. All of those reduce our clostridia, our triglycerides, and they help us with inflammation. They increase the good bacteria. Probiotics, some probiotics are helpful. I dare say most probiotics on the market are not helpful. Many studies seem to indicate that they don't even get past the gut. The gut digests them and they don't get down to the intestine where we want their help. One of the things that we can be doing is not to smoke anything. IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, is twice as likely, as well as Crohn's. They are greatly reduced if you have a diversity of gut flora. And once you stop smoking, that diversity can, and you're eating the right things and making good choices, that gut flora can change in 9 weeks after stopping smoking. So that's really encouraging if anybody's struggling with that. Okay, getting into another proactive thing that we can do is a formula. Many of us have heard of the Four Thieves formula. Many of us that are aware of essential oils, there's the Thieves oil. Different brands name them slightly differently, but it's a specific combination of herbs used by four thieves during the bubonic plague. Well, it depends on who you use as a reference as to what that particular recipe is. I've seen different recipes that have even been handed down from the Middle Ages, and even from that antiquity, they don't agree with each other. But that being said, we can still run with the general principle. The story goes of four thieves, one of whom was an herbalist, robbed the homes of many who had died in the plague. If any of you know any of the history of the plague, it was an extremely communicable disease, and everybody was afraid of it. They didn't want to deal with the dead. They didn't want to deal with any place where people had died. But these guys were eventually caught, brought to trial, and they were like, wow, how did you stay alive? So they released them in return for the recipe for the tonic that they credited with protecting them from the plague. And I don't know if any of you have seen, I forget what they call it, but there's pictures of doctors in the Middle Ages, the time of the bubonic plague, and they have these weird, uh, beak-like masks, and it actually caused a nickname for the doctors that I don't remember. But these guys would survive. Again, these doctors would survive if they put like a garlic in there, crushed garlic or crushed onion, or some essential oils. It really did make a difference. They were breathing these in and being protected by them. So the thieves survived. The legend and the recipes. It's the one that I've chosen to include. I've actually made up, and I think it's very helpful. It can also double as an insect repellent. You put 1/4 of the mixture into an 8-ounce spray bottle and fill the rest with water. Spray when you're going into heavily insect infested areas. Store it in the fridge. It minimizes the vinegar smells and makes it more refreshing. Some people have used it for foot or nail fungus, and I would spray it around the room if there was a sick person as a natural disinfectant. So adults can take 1 tablespoon several times a day. You will want to dilute it in water or herbal tea. Children, 1 teaspoon. So that would be 1/3 of the dose. Because of the different herbs, and most specifically the apple cider vinegar, it's also effective against dandruff, and you can use it not just for disinfectant, for cleaning. Again, vinegar is a very good, and these other herbs enhance it. It is a strong scent. So the recipe that I used that I got was 2 tablespoons of thyme. Thyme is an antiseptic. It's very healing. It affects the respiratory system, the stomach, the nerves. As we looked at COVID-19, these are all areas that are affected by COVID-19. Dried rosemary particularly protects the brain, the nervous system, and it also has a good effect on digestion. Again, we want our gut health to be as healthy as possible. That's going to be a very important aspect of our immune system. Dried sage, it's an antiseptic again, it helps with digestion. Excess mucus is used very effectively with pneumonia. Remember how the lungs with COVID, uh, they absorb that liquid, that it becomes thick with the hydrogel. This will help the body to expel that. I can't say it's a miracle cure, but these are definitely herbs that will help on these different processes. Dried lavender, antiseptic, powerful stimulant as well as relaxant. Dried mint is a vascular stimulant. Remember those leaky blood vessels? We don't want those. And it also works on the respiratory system. Juniper berries works on the kidneys and the brain. I decided to add the juniper berries because so many of the patients, especially early on, were experiencing kidney failure. And juniper berries are like primary for that. Then 4 to 8 cloves garlic. I went on the heavy side because garlic helps the heart, your blood pressure, your circulation. It's just such a strengthener. It also kind of helps cleanse the blood. 4 cups of the raw organic apple cider vinegar. Probiotics. These are things that are inherent with raw organic apple cider vinegar. Probiotics, enzymes, potassium. It helps to thin mucus. Again, that's something that we want. Acetic acid helps prevent the growth of germs and may contribute to the congestion of nasal passages. If you can't breathe deep, you've got challenges to oxygenate the rest of the body. High stress levels in the body, and they can cause fatigue. The amino acids in the apple cider vinegar uh, are an antidote to that. It has anti-inflammatory properties, and it helps to improve circulation in the walls of the vein. Again, be looking at with the current disease process that we're dealing with in this world. Uh-oh, uh-oh. So the last page of the PowerPoint tells you how to make it, and it's very simple. You mix it up in a big glass jar. I quadrupled the recipe. So I used a big old gallon jar, and since it's got the apple cider vinegar, it tends to corrode the metal on many of the lids tend to be metal. So you want to put plastic in between those. Put it in a cool, dark place. Shake it every day if you remember. Keep it there for 6 to 8 weeks, and then strain it out and put it in your little dropper bottles, and you're good to go, or your spray bottles, whichever ones you're going to be using. So, and that's just one of the many formulations. There's another dear lady that's an RN that I got a very complicated recipe from. It's wonderful. It's probably even more effective than this, but it is very expensive and very labor intensive. So I chose to go with this. This one cost me, from quadrupling it, it cost right around 50 to $60 for the rest for a gallon jar full. If you're not making that much, then of course it won't cost you that much. And you want as fresh ingredients as possible, but of course they're dried as well. So we're fortunate enough to have a couple of stores in town that I can go get them from, and I can be assured that they're really pretty fresh. So that's it. And I'm still getting the feedback, but by God's grace, was able to talk over it. And let's have closing prayer. Father God, thank you so much that again we have nothing to fear. You have provided everything that's needed. Your promises are sure. you will carry us through. And Lord, you've said that if we stay faithful, if we stay focused on you, if we allow you to work in us and through us, you're going to get us through. And whatever that means, Lord, if we go to sleep in this life, or if you're calling us to translation, Lord, either way, we know we can trust you. And may may what I shared, what you shared through me, be of a benefit to those that need it. And I thank you and praise you in dear Jesus' precious and holy name. Amen. So I hope that was a blessing.
Yes, it was. I thank you very much. I know a lot of people are going
Yes,
to want to have that information, so
Yeah.
they can always go back. If they're watching it here, they would have the YouTube. It'll have the date. It'll have your name. They can keep their schedule, so they can go back and look through it that way. That goes for all of
Praise
them.
God.
So
Praise
I've done
God.
each one
It's so
separate,
good to see
so-
everybody. How are you, Carol?
And how are you?
Hi, Kim.
Blessed.
Can you get on? Kim Hamilton or anybody else?
Good.
Brenda, you tried again?